everyone, good evening. You're watching The Last Word with me, Maria Shakil. It is the quest for a foreign degree and then a permanent residency that forces lakhs of Indian students to dream of Canada. The US, the UK and Canada have been top 3 choices for Indian students. And according to a Canadian government survey, the tuition and living costs for students on an average adds up to $36,123 per year. According to data from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, that is the IRCC, a total of 2,26,450 visas were approved for Indian students last year, that is 2022. India is among the top 10 source countries for international students already in Canada, and as of December 31st, 2022, 3,19,130 students from Indian origin were there studying in Canada. The students from India who go for post-secondary education in Canada spend nearly $20 billion annually. So, you would expect quality education, isn't it? But this documentary shows the dark side of the great Canadian dream. Infrastructure challenges, missing healthcare with long queues for medical checkups, the challenges of students living in -degree temperatures with shoestring budget. That's the truth of student dreams, student life, whose dreams often come crashing as soon as they land in their city of dreams. That's why on the show tonight, I will be telling you the untold story. We will be listening to the students who will share their stories. Also on the show, we'll be joined by a special guest straight from Vancouver, Ujjwal Dosanjh, who is the former Canadian minister and the first Indian origin minister of Canada. He'll be speaking to NDTV. Let me bring in my guests now. Vrinda Kator is a female student who features in the documentary. She's a student from Cape Breton University, Sydney in Canada. Namra Shukla is again a student featuring in the documentary. Georgian College, Barrie. Yashwarya Mehta is the CEO at Insight. He is the one who directed that documentary. We'll be joined by Ajay Sharma, Canada immigration expert. And Riva Kant is in fact waiting for the visa for going to Canada for her studies. Let me start with you, Vrinda. Did your university facilities or lack of it come as a shock to you?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I couldn't. Could you repeat the question, please?
Since you feature in that documentary, which we are showing on our television screens, I want you to tell me, did the university facilities that you were promised or lack of it come as a shock to you?
It did. It really did. The lack of facilities, when you say that, it begins with the availability of classes that's there. So they don't have a lot of places to sit to study. The lack of infrastructure is how I'm going to put it. And we are all being put up in the cinema theater there. And because of the recent intake, so the cinema theater has been going on since a year. And because of the recent intake this September 2023, they have shifted a lot of students without their permission to online classes. So I suppose we're not paying thousands of dollars to just be studying in a Cineplex theater or online. So yes, to begin with, there is a lack of infrastructure heavily.
So you decided to leave Canada and come to India for studies. Is that what your plan is now? And overall, how difficult was it for you to study there? You were paying thousands of dollars like most students do.
Yes. So I did. Right now, I was at a pivotal point where I had to pay my second year tuition fee, which was almost around $14,000. And seeing the economical, financial and the social situations in Canada, I decided not to make a life in Canada anymore. And right now, I have returned with a financial debt. So that stays, but I had to make the decision. It was a very pivotal point because I don't see the financial return coming back. So now I'm back and I will see where to take on from here.
Okay, Namra, tell us about your story. What was promised to you? Where did you study? And what did you actually see in reality when you landed in Canada?
So I studied at Georgian College in Berry, and my course was culinary management. First things first, I was not told about the lack of job opportunities once I finished my course because the place that I was studying at was a very small town. Secondly, nobody tells you how small a city it is, and there's not as many things to do as well, right? So once you land there, you see like it's not really all the big buildings that you see as they are showing and all the great things that they show you, but it's basically just a lack of basic amenities, very difficult to travel. And one of the major things that affected me was the lack of job opportunities because it was a very small town and there were just not enough jobs for what I studied or for a lot of courses actually.
Okay, so when you say absence of job opportunities, were you promised that there will be a job, in the sense that was there a guarantee from your university that at the end of the course there will be a job?
So they do put up big statistics. It's not just in relation to particular courses, but they do say that, the Canadian education model or the colleges in Canada and universities, they will give you good job opportunities, and it's sort of a life betterment thing that they push it as. But in comparison to that, in individual colleges, they don't tell out what the ratings of these colleges are and how the job opportunities are in those particular cities. Again, this depends very much in city to city because it's such a big land and it's so far off. Some colleges do have good job opportunities. We're not taking that away. But then the majority of colleges are at places where there's just not enough job opportunities and you will have to move to a bigger city somewhere far where everybody is looking for jobs. So
okay, let me go back to Vrinda and talk a little bit more about the promise, the false promise with which you landed in that university in Sydney in Canada, Cape Breton University, and then everything came down shattering for you, in the sense came down crashing because you realized that it was all false promise. So tell us about it, in the sense that what was so shocking about it?
So to begin with, I chose a healthcare course to begin with because as we understand and as we are shown from while we are sitting here in India, that there are a lot of healthcare opportunities. So I chose healthcare management. And when you choose that, you expect to land with a job in healthcare management after you graduate. Those are the promises that are being made. Once you land there, you realize because the influx is so much, there is definitely healthcare shortage, but then there are different levels of jobs that's available there. NOC A jobs, which are highly skilled jobs, NOC B jobs, NOC C jobs. So NOC B is a little less skilled and NOC C is the labor jobs. So once you land in Canada, you realize that you are mostly going to be landing up in the NOC C jobs. So that is the most disappointing factor there, that you are going to be situated at a labor level only, even after studying so much about the healthcare management aspect of it, the administration aspect of it. So for me, the biggest disappointment was that whatever investment I'm putting in, I'm not going to get it back, get the same investment back, because we're going to be stuck in labor jobs, in the NOC C jobs, according to the current Canadian immigration system, the way it is running.
Okay, so basically you had big plans, but nothing seemed to work. Only you realize it when you landed there. Yashwarya, in fact, wanted to study in Canada, but he dropped that plan and decided to make this documentary on the students. Why do you call it a scam, Yashwarya?
First of all, the whole thing why it prompted me to work on this documentary, because I saw a lot of people from my college, my university, basically me and Vanda, both are from Manipal. And we saw a lot of students eventually preferring for Canada. And even that opted me to think about that option. But when I started analyzing the whole scenario, I couldn't find the opportunities. I was drawing comparisons as per that of what's happening here in India, what's happening in the whole startup ecosystem, and there was no proper comparison or I could see any type of opportunities lining up for me in coming years even. And moreover, when we are in Manipal, we get to see our alumni. They are of different spectrums, be it Vikas Khanna, be it Satya Nadella from Microsoft, or be it our honorable MOS from Mighty, and they all inspire us into looking into a ecosystem which is more about generating something here rather than going abroad. So That was
when
one
you-
thing which
Okay,
prompted
so,
me into looking
so
into it
Yashwarya,
properly.
when you spoke to Vrinda while she was studying in Canada, you realized that whatever was being told to her in those, brochures which are put out and big dreams that are sold in many ways, these universities become dream merchants, that is not true.
Yeah, because we have seen a better infrastructure here in India itself, like how a classroom can be, and I know it can't be a cineplex or a theater when I'm opting for a master's course. And if that is not being made aware to the student that they are going to find themselves in a scenario where they're sitting in a theater for a education and that also masters, I mean that's a scenario which should be informed to larger populace properly. Ki this is the actual scenario rather than what they are painting.
Okay.
So that's the reason I call it a scam, because in a marketing way, you can paint a picture very easily, right? You can take out the ad of putting a classrooms in the theater, and now it's a facility which you're providing, but it's simply something which you're not able to cater to, which you have actually offered and you promised. So that was one thing I wanted to say. Ki it's a scam. It's just well marketed. It's looking really good as per the content.
So
but
all that
it's not
glitters is
something.
not gold and all that is clearly not
Exactly.
hunky-dory. Riva, what are your thoughts after listening to students who have studied in Canada? Will you do a rethink now?
Actually, I don't think that everything about that location is true. If you find a prime location over there in Canada, there are good cities which have a good opportunity, good colleges. So I think that I will still reconsider my decision and I will apply for the same.
Okay. What about Ajay Sharma? Ajay Sharma ji, what kind of complaints do you usually hear from students after they have reached Canada? You know, not the primary cities like Vancouver or Toronto, when it is about back of beyond, you know, smaller towns which are almost like university towns. And these university towns do not have proper housing setups. They lack, in fact, residential inventory as well.
Well, my take on this is very simple. This is not a Canada specific issue. Right now, the accommodation is an issue that you face in UK, you face in majority of European countries which have recently opened up for international students. My simple submission is this, that as far as Canada as a student destination is concerned, what students should look at is not only Canada. In fact, I remember very well, I was on NDTV just around 4 months back, and when we had that situation coming in regarding around 400 odd students who suffered a setback for years after landing in Canada on student visa. And even at that time, I made a point that Indian students, and it's not only specific to Canada. I personally believe, and we at Abhinav Immigration Services firmly believe, that the right time, unless you really speaking are getting an undergraduate score admission in a good university, in really a good university with good ranking, I would say the right time to go for study abroad is postgraduate studies and not undergraduate studies, because India has enough potential within the country. Within the government-sponsored Delhi universities and Bangalore and what all and the private universities ecosystem, India has enough of that in terms of quality.
Okay,
So
let me go back to the two students, Vrinda and Namra, and try and understand a little bit more about the healthcare facilities. Vrinda, if you can tell us more about it in terms of how good or bad or available or not available were the healthcare facilities.
So the healthcare facilities, they have long wait lines to begin with. I was in a province called Nova Scotia. So Nova Scotia and Canadian healthcare system is very different compared to our Indian healthcare system. Everything is owned by the government there. There is no privatization of the healthcare system. So how the system runs is, you need to get a family doctor. You need to register yourself under a family doctor. And if anything happens, you go and you find yourself reaching out to the family doctor. They do a checkup if you need a referral or anything, even if you need a small thing like an X-ray. So everything is referred and then sent on. So the problem begins is when there is a long waiting list for the family doctor for its first class citizens, Canadian citizens. And let me just put it out there, we as immigrants are second class citizens there. So if we go, and the short list, long waiting list line is, I don't want to put out the number properly, but it is, because I'm not very aware of the exact number, but it is long. It says somewhere around more than a year for a Canadian citizen to get a family doctor.
Okay. Namra, what will you tell students like Riva who are waiting for their visa to go and study in Canada?
First thing, I would like to address the gentleman who said that there are housing crises in all the countries. There are certain housing crises, but the housing crisis in Canada is on another level, considering there's lakhs of people going there. They're saying they're going to build 1.9 million homes in this year because there's not enough houses for the Canadian population itself. So it's not something that's just being faced by every country. It's massive. And secondly, everyone does say that there are a lot of opportunities in these bigger cities, but I could count these big cities on my hands. It's namely 3 or 4 cities that everyone goes to for bigger opportunities. So the only thing I would say is
do the struggle become even more, perhaps little bigger because of the temperatures there?
Yeah, for sure. That was something that I faced very harshly. There's something called seasonal depression, especially during winters, because the temperatures go as low as minus 40 degrees Celsius. And those are not the kind of temperatures we are used to in India.
Yes, but when in terms of housing arrangement, the heating system, does it work properly when you are in a rental accommodation? Is this something that the Indian students face there?
I've personally not faced any such issues. I'm not sure about Vrinda.
Okay.
So I was in Cape Breton, situated in Cape Breton, where there is not a lot of development infrastructure-wise. Like places like Ontario still has better infrastructure. So in the housing situations, including things like heating, things like electric gases, so all of them were not really fine. Like there were problems existing in the rural communities of Canada, where the immigrants are being filled as of now, the rural communities. So yes, the infrastructure problems and housing exist.
Okay, and most of these, sudden increase of universities are in these towns which are not infrastructurally developed. Thank you so much for sharing your stories. Vrinda, Namra, Yashwarya, Ajay and Riva Kant. We have a very special guest joining us now. Ujjwal Dosanjh is former Canadian MP and he was the first Indian origin minister of Canada. He's joining me live from Vancouver. Really appreciate your time, Mr. Dosanjh. If you listen to those stories that you must have heard just a few minutes back, this is really the dark side of the great Canadian dream with which Indian students go there. The tuition fee is skyrocketing, but when it comes to basic amenities, classrooms and accommodations, all this is extremely abysmal.
Well, I think what's happening in Canada is that we have several 100,000 students coming in every year. Unfortunately, over time, governments have not kept up the funding for the universities. So for universities and colleges, foreign students have become a source of income. And the housing hasn't kept up with it. And so the amenities haven't kept up with the number of students that are coming. It's simply just a question of pure bad economic management on our part. It's not intended to be that way, but that's how it's turned out to be.
And Mr. Dosanjh, the Conservatives have been going hammer and tongs against the Prime Minister over the housing crisis, high rentals and food inflation. Do you think then by raising the alarm on Niger, is this more of a calculated risk that Justin Trudeau may have taken, more of a diversionary tactic?
Well, I don't know whether the Prime Minister of Canada would ever stoop to using something like the Niger incident as a diversion tactic. If that's the case, that's rather sad. But I don't believe that it is. I think what happened was that Globe and Mail were about to release a story, essentially the story that the Prime Minister admitted in the House, And the Prime Minister, I believe, sought to get out front of the story, and that's how it happened. Whether it is wise for the Prime Minister to have done that is another question, of course.
And in your long experience as someone who has worked and served in Canada, would you say that Indo-Canadian relations are at their lowest right now?
Well, they're at their lowest, even worse than the time of the nuclear explosion when Canada kind of cooled its relationship with India. And I remember when I was the Premier of British Columbia on a state visit to India at the time of Prime Minister Vajpayee, the High Commissioner who went to see Mr. Vajpayee with me and told me that that was the first time in years that the High Commissioner of Canada had seen any official in the central government of India. So that was bad, but I understand that our relations are at least better than that moment, but they're sort of in somewhat of a deep freeze. There is no mutual trust between the two governments. I think that, to be honest, here's the issue. I mean, Mr. Trudeau is seen to be friendly towards the secessionists, Khalistanis, over the years. And Mr. Modi is now seen as less than a Democrat. India is a democracy, but that's how some of the world sees Mr. Modi. So you have a situation where the governments have less trust between them than perhaps before.
It's been a week since Justin Trudeau's statement in Parliament. Where does Indo-Canada relations go from here on?
Well, I think that, between countries, you need interlocutors that are respected by both sides. And of course, after Mr. Trudeau's statement, I think he's impaired his ability to be the interlocutor on behalf of Canada. So Canada has to find someone else that is acceptable to both India and Canada so that, we can sort of sit around the table and resolve this issue. Now, if India has done what it's alleged to have done, obviously it's a problem and it's wrong in international law. I mean, not that other countries haven't done that kind of thing before, but the issue is Canada can't ignore that. Therefore, it is going to be a touchy subject and it's going to take some time.
Mr. Dosanjh, last question to you. Given the number of students, Indian students who are in Canada, they are concerned, their parents are worried, so my question is, what should they be doing? What will you be telling them?
I think that you just have to wait for the relationship to improve in terms of conditions of these students. I think Canadian governments and universities and colleges that invite students, I think they have a moral obligation at least to ensure that when the students do come and they're able to access affordable housing, reasonably sanitary conditions, and are able to carry on with their studies. But mind you, when students come, they also come at their own responsibility, at their own risk. Students can't be promised by Canada that from the moment they land or they board the plane, that Canada is going to give them housing and give them everything. I mean, colleges make one promise generally, that there'll be a school or a college available to them and there'll be tuition. Beyond that, I think when people come to this country, they're usually on their own. The problem today is that affordable housing is in high demand and in short supply. And so students have become somewhat of a meat in the sandwich.
Yes, clearly the students have been caught in this big face-off that is continuing the standoff between India and Canada. Ujjwal Dosanjh, former Canadian MP and Minister, thank you so much for your time. That's all from me. I'll be seeing you tomorrow with another episode of The Last Word.